All right, the 78th session of the UN General Assembly, which is the largest yearly gathering of world leaders and high-ranking diplomats, is taking place in New York this week, the UNGA. This event comes amid numerous international crises as the world body comes under increased scrutiny. The event will see presidents, monarchs and prime ministers address the world in front of the UN chamber's famous green marble backdrop, while lower-level officials hustle on the sidelines to make deals and build relationships. Now, the sole permanent member of the UN Security Council attending the prominent gathering will be US President Joe Biden. President Biden arrived in New York on Sunday night. According to the White House security advisor, President Biden will tackle a range of issues here, including mobilizing financial resources for the global south, galvanizing cooperation to tackle the climate crisis, and strengthening global support for Ukraine.
With respect to his speech, the president will have a substantial section of the speech devoted to the war in Ukraine. He will talk about the fundamental fact that the United Nations Charter, the charter that founded the organization that everybody is gathering next week in New York to engage with, speaks to the basic proposition that countries cannot attack their neighbors and steal their territory by force.
Now, during the UNGA event, President Biden is also expected to meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The US National Security Advisor said the two leaders would discuss a range of bilateral and regional issues focused on the shared democratic values between the United States and Israel and a vision for a more stable and prosperous and integrated region, as well as to compare notes on effectively countering and deterring Iran.
Also on Wednesday, President Biden will sit down with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel to discuss a range of bilateral and regional issues focused on the shared democratic values between the United States and Israel and a vision for a more stable and prosperous and integrated region, as well as to compare notes on effectively countering and deterring Iran.
And as the Israeli Prime Minister departed for the United States, thousands of Israelis rallied nationwide against the government's judicial overhaul. In the 37th week of protests that included demonstrations at the airport and outside Prime Minister's residence, the protesters staged demonstrations to what they called the Victory of Democracy March. Now, many demonstrators were clad in white and some carried a large banner that declared the dictatorship will collapse. Now, apart from the US, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is also expected to appear in person to address the General Assembly on Tuesday and will appear before the Security Council the following day. Now, Bangladesh Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina will also attend the UNGA event during her stay in New York from Sunday to Friday. Hasina will attend the first day of general debate of the session, while she will address the same on Friday as well. On the sidelines of the UNGA session, Bangladesh Prime Minister has also been invited to join a dinner hosted by US President Joe Biden. Moving on, along with other leaders, Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi is also heading to New York to attend the event, and it will be the second time Raisi will attend the UNGA event. Iranian President's trip comes amid tensions between Iran and the UN nuclear watchdog. The International Atomic Energy Agency harshly criticized Iran for effectively barring several of its most experienced inspectors from monitoring the country's disputed atomic program.
The way the Islamic Republic views the world, a world devoid of poverty, nuclear weapons and weapons of mass destruction, injustice and discrimination.
Now, following his participation in the G7 and China, in Cuba, Sri Lanka President Ranil Wickremesinghe arrived in New York Earlier today, Wickremesinghe is slated to address the session on September 21st, where he will deliver a special speech. Another country from Asia, caretaker Prime Minister of Pakistan, will represent the country at the UNGA event. The Prime Minister will address session of UN General Assembly on Friday. Now, in his address, the Prime Minister will outline Pakistan's perspective on a range of regional and global issues, including Jammu and Kashmir dispute, which is amongst the long-standing unresolved items on the UN agenda. Now, he will also elaborate on the significant measures being taken by the government to consolidate Pakistan's economic recovery and efforts to mobilize domestic and external investments. Next, we get you updates from Nepal. Prime Minister Pushpa Kamal Dahal arrived in New York on Sunday. Dahal is scheduled to address the UNGA on September 21st. He will also be addressing the UN SDGs and Climate Ambition Summit. And lastly, Turkey. Prime Minister Turkey leadership Erdogan arrived in New York on Saturday. The Turkish leader is scheduled to address the session on Tuesday. During his speech, he is expected to highlight the steps Turkey has taken from development to humanitarian aid, as well as its contributions to maintaining international peace and security while re-establishing global solidarity. With more than 140 world leaders expected in New York City, diplomats will also assess progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. UNGA's 17 objectives are set to combat climate change, eradicate poverty and foster economic growth by 2030.
In the face of the most serious global peace and security crisis in recent years, and certainly